Listen, I'm in the middle of a series, and it's called 8 Life Lessons from the Wisdom and Folly of Solomon. And so we are exactly halfway through. Last week we finished lesson number 4, and so now we're on lesson number 5. But let's just really quickly do a recap of what we've gone through over the past month or so. Okay, number 1, life lesson number 1. When we seek God with all of our heart, He will be found. When you call on His name and you mean it, man, and you're like in this and you're like, God, I need you. Guess what? He will be found. That's life lesson number 1. Life lesson number 2, those who honor God will be honored by Him. What that means is when you take your life and there's a special space in your life that you dedicate to God or something that you're doing for Him, He's going to honor you. That's taking a special place in your life and giving it to God, then He's going to honor you. That is different than the love of God that He has for you, because He has that kind of love over everybody. And the favor of God is upon you because Jesus Christ has died and rose again. And when you appropriate that in your life, guess what, man? You have the favor of God, okay? But when you set aside and say, God, I want this special thing for you, He will honor you. Life lesson number 3, God offers His divine wisdom, but we must ask for it. You know, all of us need wisdom, and we have these things that we go through, and we don't exactly know where to go next, or we don't know what to do next, but God says, you know what? If you need wisdom, ask me, and I'll give it to you. Life lesson number 4, God equips us for the tasks He calls us to. We talked about that last week, that God is always calling us to something. He's always moving His kingdom forward, and He's using you to do that. And He's chosen to say, you know what? I'm going to use my people to move this kingdom forward, which leads us to life lesson number 5, which is celebrating the things God has done in you and through you will result in a life of joy and praise. Now, in order to kind of bridge the gap between last week saying, you know, that God is going to equip you for the job that He wants you to do or the thing that He has called you to celebrating what He's done, I thought it'd be really great. The opportunity arose and I took it, and we're going to hear from someone real special to us, and that is Amber. Can I invite Amber up on the stage? You remember Amber from Blesschesco and beyond. Come on over, Amber. And so honestly, I heard that she was going to be in town, and I said to Heather, you think I could interview her? And Heather's like, I said, that's a yes. Okay, so cool. And now you're here from Ecuador. And now you're here for, I don't know how long, but you are here, and it's really great to have you here. You haven't been on stage, and we haven't seen you since December, the blesschesco event, and you've been over in Ecuador since that time, so you just got back last week. I got a couple questions for you that are bridging a gap in what I'm teaching today of like God equipping us and then celebrating what God has done and all that. When did you first know that you were going to Ecuador?
Hi guys, good to see you. So I grew up here in Westchester. I grew up in the church, but I grew up in the church and I really didn't know the Lord. And so I usually say I was in choir from like age 1 to 18, and I really just did it for my college application. And so during college, God found me, and I came to know the Lord, and my life was on a very, very different trajectory. I had my plans cut out for me. I had my connections made for me, and I knew where I was going until I met Jesus. And so there was one day in particular after I had really started my walk with the Lord where I just really looked at my future and I said, God, this future looks like it's empty of you, of where I'm heading. And so I'm going to put this on the altar, and you can have my life. And so if this is not what you have for me, if you have different plans for me, I'll take it because I want to go where you are. And so I think that was about when I was 20, and I think that's when when my life plan started, right? And God was really able to work within me. And so then the next few semesters of college, the Lord opened up an opportunity that was very different than the ones I was seeking, and offered me a job in Ecuador, and I had moved a month after graduation.
Yeah, right after graduation, you kind of left. And do you feel like you felt equipped? Do you feel like you feel ready when God called you? Did you feel ready at that moment to go?
No. Still no. When I moved to Ecuador, I had studied Italian in college for some odd reason. And so when I moved to Ecuador, the only word I knew in Spanish, I don't know why, was foot. And my friends still make fun of me to this day.
Yeah. For the Italian or for the foot? I mean, both. Yeah, it's like, what are you doing studying that, right? So how has God brought you and met you at a place where you needed him and you're like, I'm not ready for this, God. I don't understand what you're doing, but he had to meet you there.
Yeah, so in Spanish and in Ecuador specifically, when someone invites you to a cup of coffee, if they say, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee, that means you pay for yours, I pay for mine. But if I say, hey, I want to invite you to coffee, that means we're not going to fight over the bill. I'm covering it.
Oh, that's how my wife and I do it. Just kidding, y'all. I'm paying for all the coffee. Okay.
So something that someone said to me when I first jumped into ministry was, hey, God is a Latino gentleman. And if he invites you, he'll pay. And so that means, right?
I like that, yeah.
So that means that not God is a big money bank in the sky. What that means is that if God's inviting you into something, he's going to provide for it. He's going to equip you. He's going to give you what you need. He's going to teach you what you need to know. And so that quote and that has really spoken to this season of my life that I've been in.
Yeah, sure. Is there any recent stories of God meeting you where you are in your need? Like, we're not ready, God, and we need you, and...
Yeah, so something that is directly tied to this church is that, my close friend Anna and I, we started the ministry together. And so we started Man of Peace with, there she is, and my mom, just the two of us in the street teaching the kids, right? And so we started to grow. We hired someone from the community, but we got to a point the majority of our kids come to us and they are illiterate because of the trauma that they've lived. And so we got to a point where we were like, we really need a reading teacher. Like, we really need a literacy teacher. We need someone that can help get these kids where they're going. And so we decided to hire someone that we knew very well. And so when we hired her on, I said, look, we don't have the money to pay for you. I was not expecting to fundraise for this. So we're going to hire you in faith, knowing that we need to pray for your salary to come. And so a month after we hired her, I got an email from Christ Community. I had never asked for a penny. I never asked for Christ Community to support us, but I got this email out of the blue that said, hey, we've prayed about it. We decided we're going to start supporting you guys every month. And so I went back to that woman that we hired and I said, girl, how hard did you pray? Because the Lord provided, but I have seen him do that time and time again throughout the ministry.
It's so awesome to hear stories like that, you know, and so let me ask you a little bit of a different question. Like, what kind of things can you remember God doing through you? Like, specifically using you to accomplish?
Not much.
Probably false.
So something that the Lord has really taught me is to be satisfied with who I am and in him. And I think that as we talk about needs, there's a major difference between a want and a need. And if you asked me this question before, I might have said, yes, God fulfills all my needs, but in my head, I might have been saying, no. Right? Because for a long time, I thought that the things I wanted were the things that the Lord should give me. But he gives us what we need, not always what we want. Mm-hmm. And so I think all of us have our own insecurities with our personalities, right? So there have been many times where I have wished that I was a little different, right? And so I told you that Annie and we run the ministry together, and Anna is a firecracker. She's incredible. You tell her to get something done, she gets it done. I'm like, that's impossible. It's already done. And meanwhile, I'm a little slower. I'm a little more of like, let's sit down and talk about how everybody feels. And so there have been so many times where I have desired to be more like that, right? I have desired to be different. But I think what's important is that the Lord equips us as we are, right, to do the things that he has for us to do. And so just last weekend, because I just got back to the States, we had gone looking for one of our girls. She was already orphaned, but her grandmother, who was taking care of her, had passed away. And so we heard that she left. She moved to go be with an aunt, and we were like, oh, like we didn't get to see her before she goes. Like, we're so worried about her. Randomly ran into her. And she said she was staying with another aunt in another neighborhood. And so we decided we're going to go find this girl. We're going to go talk to her aunt. We're going to get her back in the program and make sure that she's okay. And so we go and find this house. We go into a part of Kauai that I didn't even know existed. And we start asking for this little girl, and everybody's pointing us to there and to there and to there and another house. And we finally get to this home, and we yell her name, and she yells across the fence, and she's over there. And we said, hey, is your aunt home? She said, no, my aunt's not home. She's at work. Well, can you come outside? No, she locked me in the house. The gate's locked. I said, are you with anyone? She said, oh, I'm here with my cousin. And so her cousin apparently is in the shower. We can't talk to him. So she comes out to the gate, and we start talking to her, right? And I said, Camila, do you know how much the Lord loves you? Like, I know that your grandmother just died, and I bet that really hurts. And she smiled because it was the first time that someone had asked her how she was doing. I said, hey, you might feel super alone right now, but you've got 2 girls that love you so much, and you have an entire staff at Man of Peace that loves you. So you are not alone. And then Annie, in her firecrackerness, right, she always fulfills a need. She said, Camila, what do you need right now? And Camila starts to tell us about a very personal need, like something physical that we could provide. And I share that story because I tell you, there have been times where I wanted the Lord to change me, but in that moment, God used me and my softness and my feelings to speak to Camila in one way. And then he used Annie in her determination to fulfill the need that was there. And so there are times when we ask the Lord to change us, but he's saying, hey, you just as you are, have one half the equation that I'm going to use, and her just as she is, and that's going to fulfill my call.
I think that's great. And probably we were talking earlier before the service, and you're like, man, there's like 1,000 things I could say, man, because the Lord has shown himself faithful so many times in and through you. If there was one word that you could pick that the Lord has done in you, what would it be?
Satisfied. I think I grew up in this culture. We grew up in a culture that is just desiring so much more. And there's so much that I don't have. But it's learning that honestly, Jesus is all I want.
That's awesome. And, you know, listen, I, like many people in here, have read some news feeds lately about the craziness going on in Ecuador, and it's hit you directly. So, I mean, like I said, we hadn't talked to you since December, and things have radically changed since then. Maybe just give us an update so we can be praying for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So after the blesschesco event, we foresaw 2024 in one way, right? We're like, oh, by February, we're going to have property, we're going to build, we're going to do all this stuff. And most of you have heard that Ecuador is now at an internal war with itself, right? So what that means is that the government declared war on 20 different gangs in Ecuador that are now considered terrorists. So that allows, they've deployed the military, and that allows the military to treat them as terrorists. So for the past so many days, we've been at war. And in the eyes of the world, really sounds like Ecuador is in shambles. And that Man of Peace is probably reaping the benefits of that. But the reality is that though we saw our 2024 going according to plan, what we have seen in the last month is that the reality is that those gangs were once kids, just like ours. And so our team has been more passionate about what we do than ever before, because we exist to make sure that those kids have a place to go and that they don't end up doing that. And so because of that, even our kids have seen that, right? And so at the end of December, the violence was at an all-time high. We were having murders every single night within Kauai. Our kids, some of them were falling into the wrong crowds. We were very concerned that we were going to have to kick them out of the program because of drug involvement. Come January, that same group of kids approached us and said, hey, you know what? We want to choose Christ. We want to choose what's right. You're going to see different from us this year.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's definitely something to celebrate. That's really great.
So though we saw this year looking like building and property and this and all that, what we've seen is we've seen the Spirit move in a way that we have never seen before.
Yeah.
And so if you guys want to be praying over the next 2 months, we teamed up with Young Life. There's a Young Life in Ecuador. We're doing retreats for all of our kids. We're doing spiritual retreats. We're going to use this time as a time where Ecuador is in a moment that is just so drastic. And we said that the Lord is using that drastic time to bring our kids to him and to make a choice for a future that is starkly different than the past.
Man, that's great. That's great. Yeah, let me pray right now. Lord, I pray for Amber. I pray for Anne Marie. I pray for everybody that's part of Man of Peace. Will you protect them, Lord? Show them the next steps. Bring people all over the place to that ministry so they can see something different. They can see you, Christ. We thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Hey, thanks for being here, Amber. Awesome,
Thanks, guys.
man. Really, really cool update. Yeah.